This interview is part of the James J. Blanchard Living Library of Michigan Political History. We're here today with Oakland County Executive and former prosecutor L. Brooks Patterson. Mr. Patterson, thanks for being the guest of Michigan Political History Society.
Pleasure, Bill. Pleasure.
Let me ask you, you were born, January
4 of 1939 in the city of Detroit.
And how did you go up through grade school,
Well,
high school?
I was living in Detroit, went to grade school at a public school called Cook School on Puritan and Greenfield, I think it was. And after that, I left the public system, went on down to the U of D High School, Jesuit institution. Right. Left that in '57, went to college at U of D. And then when I graduated from U of D in '61, I taught school for a year at Catholic Central with the goal in mind of having my summers free so I could write the Great American Novel. Uh-huh. And so that's why I really got it, one time off. And then when I finished that first year of teaching, I realized that even going in the Army would be easier than trying to teach sophomores how to conjugate the verb to be. So I left to join the Army for a couple of years, then came home. It's a long story about how I ended up going to law school, but it's a good story. And graduated from law school in '67, and the rest is history. I went to work in the Oakland County Prosecutor's Office.
What about your family life growing up? Your father and mother?
Mom and Dad both immigrated from a small town in Indiana called Lagodi. Came up here, and they raised 3 children here, my twin brother and my sister, who's older than myself. And both Mom and Dad are now deceased. And I lost my twin brother back in '07. So it's my sister and I who are carrying on the family traditions.
1967, you're an assistant county prosecutor. Tom Plunkett, a Democrat, is in the office. He was elected prosecutor the next year. How do you remember that particular time and what happened then?
Yeah, I had left law school and went to join a small firm. I told Mom and Dad, I'm getting out of Detroit, too much traffic, too much. So I went to a small town, and I looked for a small town environment, and I joined a small firm on a 2-lane street called Big Beaver in Troy. So much for my small town atmosphere. Those guys in the firm had been in the prosecutor's office, so they facilitated me an appointment with Tom Plunkett, who was the chief assistant in those days, and I went to work for Tom. Then he moved up to the elected position in the next election.
Okay, so he was elected in '68.
That'd be right.
And so you were on staff there, and then what? Did Tom get a little nervous that you
I think so. I was promoted very quickly through the ranks. I never lost a case when I was prosecutor. I became the first senior trial lawyer in that office, which meant I was cherry-picking the best cases, the high-profile cases, and I was starting to make a name for myself, and I think Tom got a little nervous. He's a Democrat, I'm Republican.
Were you active as a Republican at that time?
No, not real active. I think I was a volunteer. I wasn't even a precinct delegate. And but my Republican leanings were known in the office. In fact, there was only 2 of us, me and another guy named Alex McGarry. And so I think at some point Tom got a little spooked and brought me in. Again, never lost a trial for him. And he said, I'm going to let you go. And I said, for what? Obviously, it's not my performance. And he said, no, you criticize the judge, which I did, Judge Beard. He says, and that violates policy. So I said, show me the policy. Well, there wasn't one, of course. Hey, I'm not going to show you. Sign here. I said, no. So he fired me.
So at that point, were you inspired to run against him, or had you already made up your mind?
Told him on the way out after he fired me. I said, well, you can fire me. I'm an at-will appointee, but I'm going to call a news conference tomorrow announcing I'm running against you. And I did. And some intervening things happened, which took my name idea from nowhere. Now, Tom was an elected official with a grand jury. He's handing out indictments, politically and timing it. I'm down here, but I had a case that took me into the front page of the paper and on television with Cronkite. And
that was busing?
That was the busing case.
Okay. Well, tell us a little more about the busing case.
Well, when I was a prosecutor, a woman came in. She had what I consider to be an obscene magazine. And in those days, we didn't have a warrants division. So anybody could come in, sort of shop, go down the hall. And she'd been told, no, no, no. It came to my office, and I said, hell yeah, that's obscene. And so I wrote a warrant charging the sale of an obscene magazine to a minor. This lady's daughter was like 14 or 15 at the time. And went to trial and got a conviction. Well, when I was fired, that lady looked me up because she appreciated the fact that I helped her out. That lady's name was Irene McCabe. And when she came to meet me, I don't remember Irene from that situation, but she came to me and she said, I'd like to have you represent my homeowners group. Homeowners, they have access. They fall downstairs. They get divorced. They get hit by trains. This is great. I got built-in clientele because I was now out on my own. And so we met, and the homeowners group turned out to be the North Side Action Group, which was the north side of Pontiac, who was fighting the intra-city busing order of Damon Keith. And about 6 months later, the judge, I think it was Stephen Roth, decided it was such a good thing for Pontiac, let's do the Tri-County area. And that's when it hit the fan, and everybody was upset. It was just, for a lot of valid reasons, and I was the only lawyer out there who took that first case. So that's when the name ID started sparking up, and Tom couldn't control it.
Irene McCabe, Irish name, but she was Greek, wasn't she?
Oh, she was Greek, yeah.
And was she a real, true grassroots activist? I mean,
she was.
Didn't really have a partisan.
I think she might have had some other issue, like she's fighting pornography, and that kind of stuff with the daughter. But this one took her basically to headline status. I mean, we were starting to fade, so I come up with this idea, Irene, I think it's time you walk to Washington. It was about a 47-day walk, and I walked from here at Pontiac down to Square Lake, and then when the cameras left, I left, and flew into Washington 45 days later and joined her. She came over the Washington Bridge. But she was a gamer. She worked hard, and she was a good spokesman, and she really kept the pot stirred because we were trying to get a constitutional amendment through Congress.
Right.
And we had to file a discharge petition. And there was a leader of the House at the time, a congressman named Jerry Ford, who signed it. So we were getting momentum, but then eventually all got caught up in court decisions. And after I had left and after the movement had been in court for a number of years, the anti-busing forces prevailed.
When you ran in '72 against Plunkett for prosecutor, Richard Nixon was on top of the ballot, running for re-election as president against George McGovern. Was that as big or bigger a factor in your knocking off Plunkett, or do you think you would have probably beaten him anyway based on all the busing stuff?
Well, busing was a huge factor. I made my name, not a whole household word, but certainly identified me. You're right. Nixon, I think, swept 49 states that election. If you remember November 2nd, back in 1972, it rained all day. It's a blessing for Republican candidates. It's still, at those days, it was a Republican county. So I'm running as a Republican in Republican County with a strong ticket at the top. Rain kept a lot of people home, and I had a good case that people got to know me. All those factors allowed me to beat the incumbent by about 10,000 votes. So it was like 51-49.
The busing thing, did that play out into your prosecutorial reign? But you were kind of not concerned with that anymore because, as you say, it was all caught up in the courts.
Well, no, it's right. It was in the courts, and after I got elected prosecutor, I was like, I wasn't going to represent, nor could I represent the North Side Act. Well, I then had become the National Action Group, and so we parted friends. But there was never any reason for me to get back involved with the busing movement. It sort of, like I say, wound its way through the courts.
A lot of people thought Irene McCabe might have a political future, but I don't think she ever ran for anything.
I think she ran, for county commissioner in the Pontiac area, and I think she was defeated because she was running as a Republican in Pontiac, and it was a tough race.
Once you became prosecutor, what were some of your biggest cases?
Well, the biggest ones that I tried, or the biggest ones that were in the county, there are two different ones, but I tried and convicted the two young men that kidnapped Bob Stemple's boy. A couple of young kids from Ypsilanti, Eastern Michigan, I believe, that didn't have a misdemeanor. On a lark, they grabbed Tim Stemple, held him in a trunk for 3 days, and it worked out all right. We gave them $50,000. Interesting thing, Bill. It was in Bloomfield Township. I went down to the police station. I was prosecutor. There were more security officers from GM than there were police officers. They have an army. And we said, we need $50,000 for the ransom. Boom, within 2 hours, there's $50,000, marked bills with dye on them. And it's just incredible what goes on behind the scenes of these big corporations. But anyway, it turned out they got the money. They released him. We caught him the next day.